I stood frozen as CFO Gerald Thompson publicly humiliated me in front of the entire company, demanding I apologize to his son Tyler for sabotaging his career. Everyone watched in uncomfortable silence. I knew I did nothing wrong. I simply reported critical security vulnerabilities in Tyler's code that could have cost the company millions. Gerald's face grew redder with each passing second. I made a split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of defending myself, I simply nodded and said, "Okay." My mind was already planning 3 steps ahead. That morning had started like any other Tuesday at Nexus Technologies. I grabbed my usual hazelnut coffee from the corner cafe before heading into our glass and steel office building in downtown Seattle. Rain tapped against the windows as I settled at my desk, reviewing code for our banking security project. After 7 years at Nexus, I had finally reached the position I had worked toward my entire career, senior software engineer leading our most critical project to date. The Fortify project was my baby, a $50 million contract to develop next-generation security systems for 6 major banking institutions. My team of 12 engineers had been working tirelessly for months, and we were finally approaching the finish line. The stakes couldn't have been higher, both for our clients' sensitive financial data and for Nexus itself. This contract would either cement our place as industry leaders or sink us if we failed to deliver. I scrolled through my calendar, noting the final security review scheduled for next month. Perfect timing. We were on track to exceed all performance metrics while maintaining impenetrable security protocols. I allowed myself a small smile of pride. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister, Ashley. "Just aced my thermodynamics midterm. Thanks for talking me through those practice problems last night. Love you, sis." My smile widened. Despite the 14-year age gap between us, Ashley and I had always been close. When our parents scraped together every penny to put me through college, I promised them I'd do the same for her. Now, with Ashley in her junior year of mechanical engineering, I was fulfilling that promise. Every month, I transferred money for her tuition and expenses, ensuring she could focus solely on her studies without the crushing debt I had accumulated. Our parents had built a solid foundation for us in our small Wisconsin hometown. Dad worked double shifts at the paper mill while Mom cleaned houses and took in laundry. They instilled in us an unwavering work ethic and a deep sense of integrity. "Do what's right, even when no one's watching," Dad would say. "Your character is all you truly own in this world." Those words had guided me through every decision in my career, including my choice to join Nexus Technologies. The company had initially impressed me with their stated values of innovation, integrity, and excellence. My team felt like family. We challenged each other, supported each other, and celebrated each other's successes. Until 3 months ago, when everything began to change, I was pulled from my thoughts by a notification. An unexpected all-hands meeting had been added to the calendar for 11 o'clock. Unusual, but not concerning. I closed my laptop and headed to the conference room, chatting with Jessica, our UX designer, along the way. "Any idea what this is about?" she asked, tucking her auburn hair behind her ear. "Probably another update on the quarterly numbers," I replied. "You know how Gerald loves to remind us about profit margins." We found seats near the front as the room filled with employees. Our CEO, David Parker, stood at the podium looking oddly uncomfortable. Beside him, Gerald Thompson, our CFO, wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And next to Gerald stood a young man I didn't recognize. Early 20s, expensive suit, confident posture that bordered on arrogance. David cleared his throat. "Thanks everyone for coming on short notice. I wanted to share some exciting news about the Fortify project. As you know, Catherine and her team have been doing outstanding work. To further strengthen this initiative, Gerald has suggested bringing in some fresh perspective." Gerald stepped forward, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder. "I'd like to introduce my son, Tyler Thompson, who will be joining the Fortify project as co-lead alongside Catherine." The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop as if I'd missed a step on a staircase. Co-lead? On my project? Without any consultation? Tyler graduated from Stanford last spring with a degree in computer science, Gerald continued proudly. He's been working on some innovative security concepts that will take Fortify to the next level. I maintained my professional smile as Tyler approached me after the meeting. Looking forward to working together, he said, his handshake firm but cold. I've got some ideas that will really fix the direction of this project. Fix the direction? The project that was ahead of schedule, under budget, and exceeding all specifications? As people filed out, Jessica squeezed my arm. Did you know about this? I shook my head, still processing. First I'm hearing of it. But he's fresh out of college. No real-world experience. How is he qualified to co-lead our most critical project? His last name is Thompson, I said quietly. Apparently that's qualification enough. I watched Tyler laughing with his father across the room, both of them glancing in my direction occasionally. Something told me this wasn't just an unexpected change. It was the beginning of something much worse. But I had no idea just how quickly my professional world was about to unravel. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for Tyler's onboarding. Despite my reservations, I was determined to be professional. If Gerald wanted his son to learn the ropes, I would do my best to mentor him. Perhaps his Stanford education would bring valuable insights to the team. I created a comprehensive overview of our architecture, security protocols, and development timeline. When Tyler finally arrived, 45 minutes late, he barely glanced at my carefully prepared materials. I've already reviewed the codebase, he said, dropping into a chair and propping his feet on my desk. Pretty basic stuff. I'm thinking we should scrap the current authentication system and rebuild it with blockchain. I blinked. Our authentication system passed 3 independent security audits. Implementing blockchain would require months of additional development and testing, and we're 6 weeks from delivery. Tyler waved dismissively. That's the problem with this industry. Everyone's afraid to innovate. My senior project at Stanford was a blockchain authentication system. Trust me, it's revolutionary. I'd be happy to review your proposal, I offered, but any changes would need to go through proper security validation and client approval. My dad already loves the idea, Tyler replied with a smirk, and since he controls the budget, over the next 2 weeks, I watched with increasing alarm as Tyler bulldozed his way through our carefully constructed project. He insisted on joining client calls where he made promises of features we hadn't planned or budgeted for. He scheduled strategy sessions that excluded key team members. Most concerning, he began making changes to our codebase without proper review. Each morning, I documented every violation of our protocols, every instance of Tyler bypassing security reviews. I created a separate folder on my encrypted drive, labeled Fortify Concerns, where I meticulously recorded timestamps, screenshots, and witness accounts. During our 3rd week working together, Tyler missed a critical security review meeting. When I texted to ask his whereabouts, he replied, golfing with Dad and some VPs. More important than your boring meeting. That afternoon, I discovered he had pushed code directly to our staging environment, a serious violation of our protocols requiring 2 senior engineers to review any code before staging. I immediately pulled his commits for review and found poorly implemented functions that not only failed to follow our standards, but introduced several potential vulnerabilities. I approached him privately the next day, printouts of the code in hand. Tyler, I noticed you pushed some changes yesterday without review. I've highlighted some areas of concern. I kept my tone neutral, constructive. Our team has specific security patterns we follow to ensure client data remains protected. He snatched the papers from my hand. Are you seriously trying to micromanage me right now? I don't need some control freak hovering over my every keystroke. This isn't about control, I explained. It's about following established security practices that protect our clients and our company. Look, Catherine, he said my name with thinly veiled contempt. I know you've been here for what, 5 years? 7. Whatever. The point is, you're stuck in old thinking. Silicon Valley moves fast. We push code, we iterate, we disrupt. We're developing security software for banks, I reminded him. Disruption isn't the goal. Protection is. Tyler rolled his eyes. This is exactly why my dad thought this team needed new leadership. You're too risk-averse. The situation deteriorated rapidly. During team meetings, Tyler would interrupt me mid-sentence, talk over me, or openly contradict my directions. Several team members came to me privately expressing confusion about the chain of command. We're getting mixed messages, explained Marcus, one of our senior developers. You tell us to follow the security protocols, then Tyler tells us they're optional. We don't know who to listen to. Morale plummeted. 2 developers requested transfers to other projects. During a weekly executive update, I was stunned to hear Tyler presenting my team's achievements as his own innovative implementations. When I attempted to correct the record, Gerald quickly redirected the conversation. After the meeting, I overheard Tyler talking to his father in the hallway. She's constantly undermining me, Tyler complained, always pointing out problems instead of solutions. The team doesn't respect me because of her. Don't worry about Catherine, Gerald replied. She's been coasting on her reputation for years. If she can't adapt to new leadership, we can find someone who will. I retreated to my office, anger and disbelief churning in my stomach. I'd given 7 years of my life to this company, often working nights and weekends to ensure project success. I'd never received less than exceptional on my performance reviews. Now my career was threatened because I wouldn't let an inexperienced nepotism hire compromise our security standards. That evening, I stayed late reviewing our production logs. What I found sent ice through my veins. Tyler had somehow obtained administrator credentials and deployed code directly to production, bypassing not just peer review, but our entire quality assurance process. As I dug deeper, I discovered multiple security vulnerabilities that made our system susceptible to SQL injection attacks. Anyone exploiting these vulnerabilities could potentially access our banking clients' complete financial databases. The severity of the situation was clear. Tyler's unauthorized changes had placed $50 million worth of contracts at risk, not to mention the incalculable damage to our clients if their data was breached. This wasn't just about my job anymore. Real people's financial security was at stake. I picked up my phone to call Jessica, my hands slightly shaking. I need your eyes on something, I said when she answered. But this stays between us for now. Jessica arrived within 20 minutes. Her expression grew increasingly grim as I walked her through my findings. This is catastrophic, she whispered. If these vulnerabilities were exploited. I know. What are you going to do? I stared at my screen, the malformed code glaring back at me. The right thing. I barely slept that night. My mind raced through every possible approach to addressing the security crisis Tyler had created. The simplest solution would be to quietly fix the vulnerabilities myself. No drama, no confrontation, just solve the problem and move on. But that approach solved nothing long-term. Tyler would continue making dangerous changes, believing there were no consequences. More importantly, our clients deserved to know if their data had been at risk. By morning, I had made my decision. I would follow proper channels and protocols, documenting everything meticulously. If this cost me my job, so be it. I couldn't compromise on security, not for career advancement, not for workplace harmony, and certainly not to protect a CFO's son from his own incompetence. I called Michael, my direct manager, and requested an urgent meeting. Michael had always been fair and level-headed, someone I trusted to handle difficult situations appropriately. What's so urgent it couldn't wait for our weekly sync? Michael asked as he closed his office door. I placed a folder on his desk. I've discovered critical security vulnerabilities in our production environment. These could potentially expose client financial data to external attacks. Michael's expression tightened. How bad are we talking? Bad enough that we need to notify the security team immediately and potentially our clients if there's been any indication of attempted exploitation. He flipped through my documentation, his frown deepening. And Tyler pushed these changes? Without review? I nodded. Michael rubbed his forehead. Catherine, you know how delicate this is. Gerald is very protective of Tyler. This isn't about Tyler, I insisted. It's about protecting our clients and our company. We have an ethical and legal obligation to address security risks of this magnitude. Let me handle this, Michael said finally. I'll discuss it with the security team directly. In the meantime, can you work on patches? Already started. I'll have them ready by this afternoon. Michael looked relieved. Keep this between us for now. The last thing we need is panic spreading through the office. I left his office feeling marginally better. Michael would do the right thing. He had to. The security team confirmed my findings within hours. The lead security analyst, Alan, called me directly. "We're implementing your patches now," he said, his voice tense. "But Catherine, this is serious. These vulnerabilities have been live for almost a week. We're running forensic analysis to determine if there have been any exploitation attempts. What about notification to clients?" Alan hesitated. "That decision is above my pay grade. Legal and executive leadership will have to make that call." By 5 o'clock, I was summoned to a meeting with Michael, Alan, our legal director Sophia, and Tyler. Gerald was notably absent. Sophia opened with a stern expression. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Alan's team has confirmed multiple severe vulnerabilities in our production environment." Tyler immediately went on the offensive. "If there are issues, they stem from the legacy authentication system Catherine insisted on keeping. I've been pushing for weeks to replace it." I stared at him in disbelief. "The vulnerabilities exist precisely in the new code you pushed directly to production without review. Code that bypassed our entire security protocol." "I don't appreciate these accusations," Tyler said, his voice rising. "I've never pushed code directly to production." Alan cleared his throat awkwardly. "Actually, our logs show the commits came from your credentials on Tuesday at 9:43 p.m. "Someone must have used my account," Tyler protested. "Catherine has had it out for me since day one. She's probably behind this, trying to make me look bad." The meeting devolved from there. Tyler became increasingly defensive, alternating between denying responsibility and blaming others. Sophia finally intervened, focusing the discussion on immediate remediation rather than blame. "The priority is fixing the vulnerabilities and determining if any data was compromised," she said firmly. "We can sort out how it happened afterward." As the meeting concluded, Tyler stormed out without another word. Michael pulled me aside. "Catherine, you need to tread carefully here. Gerald is very influential with the board." "Are you suggesting I should have ignored critical security flaws?" Michael lowered his voice. "Of course not. Just handle this diplomatically. I spent the weekend working with my team to implement comprehensive fixes and additional security measures. We ran penetration tests until we were confident the system was secure again. Thankfully, the forensic analysis showed no evidence of external exploitation. We had caught the vulnerabilities before they could be used maliciously." Monday morning, I was feeling cautiously optimistic as I prepared for our executive briefing. We had averted a potential disaster, and surely the leadership team would recognize the importance of following proper security protocols going forward. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived at the conference room, Gerald was already there, along with Tyler, David, and several board members I recognized, but rarely interacted with. Gerald didn't wait for the meeting to officially start. "Catherine, I understand you've been making serious allegations against my son." I kept my voice steady. "I reported security vulnerabilities in our production environment, as is my responsibility as project lead. Vulnerabilities that mysteriously appeared right after you were informed Tyler would be taking a more active leadership role," Gerald countered. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you suggesting I deliberately created security flaws in our banking software? That would be not only unethical, but potentially criminal." "What I'm suggesting," Gerald continued, his voice dangerously calm, "is that perhaps you're having difficulty adjusting to sharing leadership of a project you've controlled for too long." David, our CEO, finally spoke up. "Let's focus on facts. The vulnerabilities were real, they've been fixed, and no client data was compromised. Going forward, we need tighter controls on production deployments." "I couldn't agree more," Gerald said smoothly, "which is why I'm proposing a restructuring of the Fortify project leadership. Tyler will assume primary responsibility for client relations and strategic direction, while Catherine can focus on what she does best, implementation details and quality assurance." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was being demoted for doing my job correctly, while Tyler was being promoted despite creating a security crisis. "With all due respect," I said, struggling to keep my voice level, "that restructuring would effectively remove me from leadership of a project I've successfully managed from inception. Based on what metrics or performance issues is this change being proposed?" One of the board members, a woman I didn't recognize, leaned forward. "I'd like to hear the answer to that question as well," The Fortify project has been our most successful initiative this year. Gerald's expression hardened. The metrics don't capture everything. There have been concerns about Catherine's collaborative approach and resistance to innovation. Innovation should never come at the expense of security, I countered, especially when we're responsible for protecting financial institutions and their customers. The meeting continued in this vein, with Gerald presenting a narrative that painted me as territorial and resistant to change, while portraying Tyler as a visionary being stifled by bureaucracy. Despite a few supportive comments from David and the female board member, it was clear which way the wind was blowing. As the meeting ended, Gerald announced a company all-hands for the following day. "We'll announce the restructuring then," he said with finality. I left the room feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. 7 years of exemplary work erased by 3 weeks of office politics. As I walked back to my desk in a daze, I noticed Tyler waiting by the elevator, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Nothing personal, Catherine," he said as I approached. "Just business. Some people just can't adapt to change." In that moment, I realized this had never been about my performance, security protocols, or even the Fortify project. It was about power. Gerald's power to place his son wherever he wanted, regardless of merit. Tyler's power to fail upward, based solely on his last name. And I had just become an inconvenient obstacle in their path. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock the next day. I spent the morning updating my documentation, ensuring every security incident and protocol violation was meticulously recorded with timestamps and supporting evidence. If I was going to be sidelined, at least there would be an accurate record of what had transpired. My team sensed something was wrong. Jessica stopped by my desk around noon. "Everyone's talking about the all-hands," she said quietly. "Rumors are flying that there's a major announcement about Fortify." I nodded, unable to share what I knew was coming. "Whatever happens," Jessica continued, "the team is behind you. We all know who's really been leading this project." Her support meant everything, but I wondered how many would publicly stand with me once Gerald made his announcement. Nexus had always had an unspoken culture of acquiescence to executive decisions, no matter how questionable. At 1:45, employees began filing into our largest conference room. I took a seat in the middle, neither hiding in the back nor prominently displaying myself in the front. Jessica sat beside me, along with Marcus and a few other members of my team. David opened the meeting with standard updates on company performance and upcoming initiatives. His demeanor seemed strained, his usual enthusiastic presentation style replaced with a more subdued delivery. When he introduced Gerald, he quickly stepped away from the podium. Gerald approached with confidence, Tyler following closely behind. "Thank you, David. Before I share some exciting changes to the Fortify project, I want to acknowledge the incredible work this company has been doing. Our growth this quarter exceeded projections by 17%. He continued with corporate platitudes for several minutes before finally turning to the real purpose of the meeting. Now, regarding the Fortify project, as many of you know, this is a cornerstone initiative for Nexus, representing a $50 million opportunity with some of the nation's largest financial institutions. Gerald gestured for Tyler to join him at the podium. To ensure we deliver the most innovative solution possible, we're implementing a strategic leadership change. Tyler Thompson will be assuming the role of project director, overseeing all aspects of Fortify through to completion and delivery. A murmur ran through the room. Several people glanced in my direction. Gerald continued as if he didn't notice the discomfort. Catherine will transition to a supporting role, focusing on implementation and testing. This restructuring leverages the strengths of both individuals while addressing some concerns that have emerged in recent weeks. I sat perfectly still, my expression neutral despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. 7 years of dedication reduced to implementation and testing in a public announcement. Gerald's expression suddenly hardened as he looked directly at me. However, before this transition can be finalized, there's a matter that needs to be addressed. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of what I'd expected. It has come to my attention that certain individuals have been creating a hostile work environment for Tyler since he joined the project. There have been deliberate attempts to undermine his authority, dismiss his ideas, and even sabotage his contributions. The room went completely silent. Every eye turned toward me. "Catherine," Gerald's voice rose, "your behavior has been unprofessional and frankly disappointing. Before you can continue in any capacity on the Fortify project, I expect you to publicly apologize to my son for your actions." The silence deepened. I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Jessica tensed beside me, her hand moving slightly toward mine in a gesture of support. Tyler stood next to his father, a self-satisfied smile playing at his lips. He was enjoying this. My public humiliation was his moment of triumph. Gerald's face reddened as he continued. "In fact, I'm making this absolutely clear. You're off the project until you apologize to my son." I felt a strange calm wash over me. The situation had become so absurd, so divorced from reality, that it no longer had power to wound me. In that moment of clarity, I saw Gerald and Tyler for what they were, not powerful executives to be feared, but insecure men abusing their authority. I rose slowly from my seat. Every face in the room turned toward me, expressions ranging from pity to discomfort to outrage on my behalf. I walked deliberately to the center aisle, making eye contact with Gerald. "Okay," I said simply, my voice carrying in the silent room. Gerald seemed taken aback by my acquiescence. He'd clearly expected resistance, argument, perhaps even tears. My calm acceptance visibly threw him off balance. "Well, good," he stammered. "I expect that apology first thing tomorrow morning." I nodded once, turned, and walked out of the conference room with my head held high. As the door closed behind me, I heard the meeting erupt into confused murmurs. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and began typing my resignation letter. My decision was made. I would not remain at a company where integrity took a back seat to nepotism, where doing the right thing was punishable by public humiliation. 10 minutes later, Jessica burst into my office, her face flushed with anger. "That was the most unprofessional display I've ever witnessed," she fumed. "Gerald should be ashamed. Everyone is talking about it." "What's the general reaction?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Shock, mostly. Even people who don't know the details think it was inappropriate." Marcus almost stood up to say something before David quickly ended the meeting. I nodded, continuing to type. Jessica studied me. "You're not actually going to apologize, are you?" "No," I said simply. "I'm resigning." Her eyes widened. "Catherine, don't let them win like that. This isn't about winning or losing, Jess. It's about integrity. I can't work somewhere that doesn't value truth and ethical behavior." Jessica sank into the chair across from me. "What will you do?" "I have options. I hadn't planned to share this yet, but the circumstances had changed. Jason Baker has been trying to recruit me to his startup for months. I've been turning him down out of loyalty to Nexus and our team." "Synertech?" Jessica looked impressed. "They're doing amazing work in security." I nodded. I texted Jason after the meeting. He still wants me, and now he's offering a leadership position heading their security division. As we talked, my email pinged with a new message. It was from Alan in security. "Catherine, something strange is happening. Someone accessed the server logs from last week and appears to be modifying timestamps on the vulnerability reports. I've locked down access and preserved the originals, but thought you should know." I showed Jessica the email. "They're trying to rewrite history. Make it look like I created the vulnerabilities after Tyler's code was reviewed." Jessica's expression darkened. "That's crossing a line. That's potentially illegal. Which is why I'm meeting with Patricia Nelson tomorrow morning." "The employment attorney?" "Smart." I finished my resignation letter, making it professional and factual, without emotion. I detailed my reasons for leaving: the undermining of security protocols, the public humiliation, and the apparent tampering with server logs. I made 3 copies, one for Gerald, one for David, and one for the board of directors. As Jessica left my office, she turned back with a determined expression. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. The team knows the truth." That evening, I received texts and calls from several team members expressing their support and outrage at what had transpired. Their solidarity meant everything, but my mind was made up. Sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing. I slept surprisingly well that night, The decision to leave Nexus brought with it an unexpected peace. I would stand up for what was right, maintain my integrity, and move forward with my head held high. What I didn't realize was that the next day would bring a twist that no one, not even Gerald Thompson, could have anticipated. I woke before my alarm, feeling strangely energized despite the previous day's events. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I carefully selected my outfit, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism. Today wasn't about slinking away in defeat. It was about making a principled exit on my own terms. Before heading to the office, I called my parents. Their unwavering support had always been my foundation, and today I needed it more than ever. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something," I began, explaining the situation at Nexus. Dad listened quietly before responding. "Catherine, remember what I always told you about character? It's all you truly own in this world," I recited. "Exactly. And no job is worth compromising that. Your mother and I are proud of you for standing up for what's right." Mom added her own reassurance. "You're making the right decision, honey. When one door closes, a better one opens." Their confidence in me strengthened my resolve. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and created a comprehensive list of everything I had contributed to Nexus over 7 years. 5 major projects delivered successfully, 3 patents filed, 15 security protocols established, and countless smaller achievements. This wasn't just for my own validation. It would serve as a reminder during job interviews of my proven track record. Next, I reached out to 3 former colleagues who had left Nexus over the past year. Their experiences might help me understand if my situation was isolated or part of a broader pattern within the company. James, who had been a senior developer, responded almost immediately. Not surprised. Gerald has been pushing competent people out to make room for his cronies. 3 directors have left since January. Allison, a former project manager, shared a similar story. They did the same to me when I questioned a vendor contract Gerald insisted on. Companies changing, and not for the better. Their responses confirmed what I had suspected. The issues at Nexus went deeper than Tyler and extended beyond the Fortify project. The company's values were shifting, prioritizing politics over performance and connections over competence. At 9 o'clock, I met with Patricia Nelson, the employment attorney. Her office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the sterile corporate environment of Nexus. "Walk me through the situation," Patricia said after introductions. I provided a detailed account, from Tyler's arrival to the security vulnerabilities to yesterday's public confrontation. I shared copies of my documentation, including the email from Alan about the log tampering. Patricia reviewed the materials thoughtfully. They've put themselves in a vulnerable position. The public demand for an apology, especially in relation to reporting legitimate security concerns, could constitute a hostile work environment. The log tampering, if proven, is particularly problematic. "What are my options?" I asked. "You mentioned you're planning to resign. While that's certainly your prerogative, you should know that you would have grounds for a wrongful termination claim if they fire you for refusing to apologize." I considered this. I'm not looking to sue. I just want a clean break and to protect my professional reputation. Patricia nodded. "In that case, let's review your employment contract and prepare a resignation strategy that safeguards your interests." We spent the next hour examining my contract. Patricia pointed out several key provisions I hadn't fully appreciated, including a non-disparagement clause that worked both ways. Not only was I prohibited from speaking negatively about Nexus, but they were similarly constrained from damaging my reputation. "This gives you leverage," Patricia explained. "They can't publicly disparage your work or professionalism without potentially violating this clause." Another provision caught my attention. A clause stating that all intellectual property I developed during my employment belonged to Nexus, but with an important exception. If I was the primary inventor on a patent application, I retained certain usage rights even after employment ended. I filed 3 patents while at Nexus, I noted. 2 have been approved, and 1 is pending. Patricia made a note. That could be valuable in your next position. By the end of our meeting, we had developed a clear plan. First, I would secure copies of all my performance reviews, project successes, and contributions to establish my track record. Second, I would submit my resignation letter directly to Gerald, David, and the board, clearly outlining my reasons for leaving without being accusatory. Third, I would negotiate a neutral reference and appropriate severance package based on my years of service. One last thing, Patricia advised. Back up your documentation securely, but don't take any proprietary company information. That could create legal issues. I assured her I had no intention of taking Nexus's intellectual property. My documentation focused solely on the timeline of events and communications related to the security incidents. After leaving Patricia's office, I called Jason Baker to formally accept his offer at Synertech. The position came with a significant salary increase, equity in the company, and most importantly, leadership of their security division, a role that would fully utilize my expertise. "You won't regret this, Catherine," Jason said enthusiastically. "We've been trying to solve the exact challenges you specialize in. When can you start?" "I'm submitting my resignation today. I'll need 2 weeks to properly transition my responsibilities." "Perfect. We'll have everything ready for you." My final stop before heading to Nexus was a secure data center where I uploaded copies of all my documentation to an encrypted server. If Gerald attempted to dispute my account of events, I would have evidence safely preserved. As I drove to the office, I felt a calm determination. I had been naive to believe that excellent work would always be recognized and rewarded, that integrity would be valued over politics. But this experience hadn't made me cynical. Instead, it had clarified what truly mattered to me in my career and the type of organization where I wanted to contribute. I pulled into the Nexus parking lot for what would likely be one of my last times. The glass building reflected the clouds overhead, constantly shifting and changing, much like the company itself had changed beneath its polished surface. What I didn't realize as I walked through those doors was that events were already in motion that would dramatically alter the outcome I had planned. The next 24 hours would reveal truths that even Gerald Thompson couldn't ignore. I arrived at the office at 7:30, 2 hours before most employees. The early morning quiet provided the perfect opportunity to clear my desk without an audience. I methodically packed my personal items, the small, succulent Jessica had given me last Christmas, framed photos of my family, technical books I had collected over the years. 7 years of my professional life fit into a single cardboard box. It seemed simultaneously too little and too much. With my personal belongings secured in my car, I returned to my office to write the final version of my resignation letter. I had drafted it the previous night, but now I carefully refined the language to be clear, professional, and unassailable. The letter detailed my reasons for leaving: the systematic undermining of security protocols, the public humiliation in the all-hands meeting, and most importantly, the company's apparent shift away from the values of integrity and excellence that had initially attracted me. I emphasized my continued belief in the Fortify project and my hope for its success, despite my departure. I made 3 copies, one for Gerald, one for David, and one to be sent electronically to the board of directors. The letter was factual rather than emotional, focusing on professional concerns rather than personal grievances. At 8:45, I saw Gerald arrive. He typically went straight to his office and wouldn't emerge until after his morning coffee and email review. I would confront him around 9:15, when he was settled but before the day became hectic. While waiting, I reviewed my documentation one final time, ensuring everything was properly organized and accessible should it be needed later. The evidence of Tyler's security violations, the email from Alan confirming the log tampering attempt, screenshots of the vulnerability reports, all securely backed up and ready. At 9:10, I sent an email to the board of directors with my resignation letter attached. The timestamp would be important if Gerald attempted to dispute the sequence of events later. I also blind copied David, ensuring he would see my full explanation even if Gerald tried to present an edited version. At 9:15, I walked calmly to Gerald's office. His assistant, Marion, looked up as I approached. "Is he available?" I asked pleasantly. "He just finished his call. Go right in." Marion had always been kind to me, and I detected a note of sympathy in her voice. Word of yesterday's meeting had clearly spread throughout the company. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Gerald was seated behind his massive desk, typing on his computer. He looked up, surprise briefly crossing his face before his expression settled into smug satisfaction. Catherine, I trust you're here to deliver that apology to Tyler? Actually, no. I placed the envelope containing my resignation letter on his desk. I'm here to resign, effective immediately. Gerald's satisfied expression faltered. Resign? Don't be dramatic. All I asked for was a simple apology. An apology for doing my job correctly would be dishonest. I value integrity too much to compromise it, even to preserve my position here. Gerald's face flushed. So instead of admitting you were wrong, you're running away. That's rather unprofessional. I've documented every aspect of the security vulnerabilities Tyler introduced, including the timestamps that were nearly altered last night. I've outlined all of this in my resignation letter, which I've also shared with the board. At the mention of the board, Gerald's expression darkened. The board has more important matters to address than the hurt feelings of a mid-level engineer. Perhaps. But I think they'll be very interested in potential liability issues related to banking security breaches. I maintained eye contact, my voice steady. I've also accepted a position at Synertech, where I'll be leading their security division. Gerald leaned back, studying me. You realize Nexus will enforce the non-compete clause in your contract. Synertech is a direct competitor. My attorney reviewed my contract this morning. The non-compete applies only to specific technologies I developed at Nexus. I'll be working in completely different areas at Synertech. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Gerald's face. You consulted an attorney? It seemed prudent, given the circumstances. Gerald's expression hardened again. I see. Well, if that's your decision, then clear out your desk by noon. Marion will escort you out. My desk is already cleared, I replied calmly. And I've prepared comprehensive transition documents for my team. I wouldn't leave them without proper support. I turned to leave, but Gerald wasn't finished. You know, Catherine, I had high hopes for you here. But this tantrum over having to share authority with a new perspective speaks volumes about your character. I paused at the door. No, Gerald. My willingness to walk away from a job I love rather than compromise my principles is what speaks to my character. As I returned to my office, I found Tyler waiting, leaning against my doorframe with his arms crossed. Here for the grand apology? He asked with a smirk. Dad says you've learned your lesson. Actually, Tyler, I've resigned. His smug expression faltered. You what? Resigned. Effective immediately. I've accepted a leadership position elsewhere. Tyler's confidence visibly wavered. You're bluffing. Nobody walks away from Nexus. I just did. I moved past him into my office. If you'll excuse me, I need to say goodbye to my team. This is about the security thing, isn't it? It wasn't even that serious. Banks get hacked all the time. I turned to face him. That security thing could have exposed millions of people's financial data. It's exactly that attitude that made it impossible for me to continue working here. Tyler stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you're so much better than everyone else with your protocols and processes. Newsflash. In the real world, connections matter more than code. Dad will make sure you never work in this industry again. Before I could respond, Jessica appeared at my door. Catherine, there's something you need to see. I followed her to the conference room where several team members had gathered around a laptop. On the screen was an email from our primary banking client, First National. They moved up the final security review, Marcus explained. They're here now. Their CISO wants to speak with you specifically. This was unexpected. The final review wasn't scheduled for another 3 weeks. Why the sudden change? I asked. Jessica looked uncomfortable. Apparently, someone sent them an anonymous tip about potential security issues. I felt a chill. If the client had been alerted to vulnerabilities, the entire contract could be in jeopardy. As we discussed this development, David appeared at the door, his expression grave. Catherine, a word, please. In the hallway, David spoke in hushed tones. Gerald tells me you've resigned. That's correct. And you've shared your resignation letter with the board? Yes. I felt they should understand my reasons for leaving. David ran a hand through his hair. First National's entire security team is here. Their CISO is asking questions about vulnerabilities and altered logs. What do you know about this? Only that the vulnerabilities were real, They were fixed, and someone attempted to modify the timestamps on the logs. I reported all of this through proper channels. David studied me. Did you contact First National directly? Absolutely not. That would be inappropriate and potentially violate my confidentiality agreements. Before David could respond, we were interrupted by a commotion from the direction of the lobby. Gerald was walking rapidly toward us, his face flushed with anger. Behind him was a woman in a crisp suit, whom I recognized as Amara Johnson, First National's Chief Information Security Officer. "David!" Gerald called out. "We need to address this immediately. Miss Johnson is making outrageous accusations about our security practices." Amara stepped forward. "Not accusations, Mr. Thompson. Questions based on documentation we received this morning detailing multiple severe vulnerabilities in the Fortify system." Gerald shot me a venomous look. "Catherine, if you sent confidential information to our client—" "She didn't," interrupted a new voice. Alan from security approached, tablet in hand. "The email to First National came from Tyler's account. Sent last night at 11:27 p.m. Everyone turned to look at Tyler, who had followed us into the hallway. His face paled. "That's ridiculous," he stammered. "Someone must have hacked my account." Alan shook his head. "The email was sent from your company laptop, from within our building. I have the logs right here." "Let me see that," Gerald demanded, snatching the tablet from Alan. As he read, his expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "This has to be a mistake." Amara's voice was steel. "The documentation we received appears authentic, including detailed logs showing unauthorized code deployments to production without security review. Most concerning are the timestamps showing attempts to retroactively modify security logs." Gerald looked up from the tablet, his face now ashen. "I assure you, Miss Johnson, this is not how Nexus operates. We maintain the highest security standards." "Then perhaps you can explain why my team found 3 additional vulnerabilities during our preliminary review this morning?" Amara countered. "Vulnerabilities that could have exposed our customers' financial data?" The hallway fell silent. David cleared his throat. "Let's continue this discussion in the boardroom. Catherine, would you join us, please?" Gerald looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find the words. As we moved toward the boardroom, the company's general counsel, Richard Martinez, emerged from his office, looking distinctly alarmed. "David, Gerald, we need to talk immediately," he said urgently. "First National's legal team just contacted me. They're considering invoking the security breach clause in our contract." The security breach clause, a provision that allowed clients to terminate contracts without penalty if Nexus failed to maintain agreed-upon security standards. The $50 million Fortify project was potentially unraveling before our eyes. Richard noticed me and stopped abruptly. "Catherine, I just received your resignation letter from the board. They've called an emergency session for 3 o'clock. Gerald's face contorted with rage. "This is your doing," he hissed at me. "You've deliberately sabotaged this company because your feelings were hurt." Before I could respond, Richard interjected firmly. "Gerald, that's enough. Catherine reported security issues through proper channels, as required by our policies and our client contracts. If those reports were ignored or suppressed, that's a serious matter." Tyler had been uncharacteristically silent. Now he spoke, his voice almost desperate. "It wasn't a big deal. I was just trying to improve the system." Catherine overreacted because she couldn't handle my ideas being better than hers. Amara fixed Tyler with an icy stare. "Young man, I've been in cybersecurity for 20 years. The vulnerabilities I saw this morning weren't improvements. They were textbook examples of what not to do in financial security software." As we entered the boardroom, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened next, I had stood by my principles. I had protected my clients' data to the best of my ability. I had refused to compromise my integrity for political expedience. The next few hours would determine not just my professional future, but potentially the fate of Nexus Technologies itself. And based on the expressions of everyone in that room, I wasn't the only one who knew it. The boardroom quickly filled with key players in this unfolding drama. David, Gerald, Tyler, Richard, Alan, Amara, and 2 members of her security team, and 3 Nexus board members who had been hastily called in. I sat quietly, observing the tense interactions as everyone settled around the massive oak table. Amara didn't waste time on pleasantries. Let me be absolutely clear about where we stand. First National has invested considerable resources in the Fortify project based on Nexus's reputation for security excellence. What we've discovered this morning raises serious questions about that reputation. David leaned forward. Amara, we value our relationship with First National. Whatever concerns you have, I assure you will address them immediately and transparently. Gerald attempted to redirect the conversation. This appears to be an isolated incident that's been blown out of proportion. A junior developer made some overzealous changes that were caught and corrected before any actual breach occurred. Amara's expression hardened. Mr. Thompson, the vulnerabilities we found weren't overzealous changes. They were fundamental security failures that violated multiple requirements in our contract. And based on the documentation we received, they weren't caught by your security team. They were reported by Catherine despite apparent pressure not to do so. All eyes turned to me. I maintained my professional composure, though inside I was processing the implications of Amara's statement. Someone, presumably Tyler, had sent First National the actual security logs, perhaps in a misguided attempt to blame me. Instead, those same logs validated my actions. Richard, our legal counsel, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should hear directly from Catherine about what transpired. I spoke calmly and factually, outlining the sequence of events from Tyler's arrival through the discovery of the security vulnerabilities to my decision to resign. I avoided accusations or emotional language, focusing instead on the documented timeline. I reported the vulnerabilities through proper channels. The security team confirmed their severity and implemented patches I had prepared. At no point did I contact First National or any other client directly. My only concern was protecting sensitive financial data and maintaining the integrity of our security protocols. One of the board members, Eleanor Watson, whom I recognized from yesterday's all hands, asked a pointed question. Gerald, were you aware of these security issues before today? Gerald shifted uncomfortably. I was informed that there were some minor concerns that had been addressed. I wasn't given details about their severity. Alan from security couldn't contain himself. That's not accurate. I personally briefed Gerald last Thursday about the critical nature of the vulnerabilities and the forensic evidence showing they originated from Tyler's commits. Tyler suddenly pushed back from the table. This is ridiculous. I'm being set up because Catherine couldn't handle sharing leadership. She probably created those vulnerabilities herself to make me look bad. Amara raised an eyebrow. Yet you're the one who sent us the logs from your email account, Mr. Thompson. Logs that clearly show your credentials were used to push unauthorized code to production. Tyler's face went pale. I didn't. I was just trying to show that Catherine was overreacting. I didn't actually read through all the logs. The room fell silent as the implications of Tyler's admissions sank in. Richard turned to Gerald. Did you instruct Tyler to send company logs to First National? Gerald's expression was thunderous. Of course not. Tyler acted completely on his own. Tyler looked betrayed. Dad, I was just trying to help. You said Catherine was making a big deal out of nothing to undermine me. I thought if I showed the client there was no real issue. By sending them confidential security logs without authorization? Richard's voice was incredulous. Do you understand the contractual and possibly legal implications of what you've done? The meeting continued for another hour, as the full extent of the situation became clear. The board members asked increasingly direct questions about Gerald's handling of the Fortify project, his decision to place Tyler in a co-lead position despite his lack of experience, and the public demand for me to apologize for doing my job correctly. Throughout the discussion, I maintained my composure, answering questions truthfully but without malice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability and protecting the integrity of work that affected millions of banking customers. Finally, Eleanor addressed me directly. Catherine, I understand you've submitted your resignation. Given what we've learned today, would you reconsider if certain changes were made to the project structure? I considered her question carefully. I've already accepted a position elsewhere. While I care deeply about Nexus and the Fortify project, I believe the events of the past few weeks indicate a fundamental disconnect between my professional values and the current leadership priorities. David looked genuinely dismayed. Catherine, your contributions to Nexus have been invaluable. Is there anything that would change your mind? I believe in leadership that values integrity over politics, expertise over connections, and security over expediency, I replied. If Nexus recommits to those principles, it would be a company I'd be proud to work for. But I've given my word to Synertech, and I intend to honor that commitment. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. We respect your decision. Before you leave, would you be willing to work with our security team to ensure a proper handover of the Fortify project? First, National has specifically requested your involvement in addressing their concerns. Of course, I agreed. I wouldn't leave my team or our clients vulnerable. As the meeting concluded, the board members requested a private session with David and Richard. Gerald and Tyler were asked to wait in Gerald's office. Amara and her team retreated to a separate conference room to continue their security assessment. I returned to my office to find Jessica, Marcus, and several other team members waiting anxiously. What happened? Jessica asked. It's complicated, I replied, not wanting to breach confidentiality. But I think things are going to change around here. Are you still leaving? Marcus looked concerned. Yes. I've accepted a position at Synertech, but I'll be here for the next 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition. Over the next few hours, a series of announcements rippled through Nexus. Gerald and Tyler were placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. David would temporarily oversee the Fortify project, with support from the security team. The board had called an emergency session to review leadership practices and security protocols. Late that afternoon, I was surprised by a knock on my office door. It was David, looking simultaneously exhausted and determined. Catherine, I owe you an apology, he began. I should have intervened earlier when it became clear that Gerald was allowing personal considerations to override company policy. You were in a difficult position, I acknowledged. Not as difficult as yours. Standing up for what's right shouldn't cost someone their job. David hesitated. The board has asked me to make you an offer. They understand you've accepted another position, but they'd like to propose a consulting arrangement during the transition. Full autonomy, reporting directly to the board, with compensation reflecting your expertise and the unfortunate circumstances of recent events. It was a generous offer, one that would allow me to support my team through the transition while still honoring my commitment to Synertech. After discussing the details, I agreed to a 6-week consulting contract. There's one more thing, David added. The board has asked for your recommendations on restructuring our security governance to prevent similar issues in the future. They were impressed by your integrity throughout this situation. That evening, I called Jason at Synertech to explain the consulting arrangement. Far from being disappointed at the delayed start date, he was enthusiastic. This is perfect, Catherine. It shows your professionalism and gives us more time to prepare for your arrival. Plus, he added with a chuckle, poaching Nexus's star engineer after they tried to push you out is the kind of industry story that markets itself. Over the next 6 weeks, Nexus underwent significant changes. Gerald resigned from his position as CFO, citing personal reasons in the press release. Tyler quietly disappeared from the company directory. The board initiated a comprehensive review of hiring practices and security protocols, implementing many of my recommendations. First National, impressed by how the situation was handled, not only continued with the Fortify contract, but expanded it to include additional services. Several team members who had been considering leaving decided to stay, encouraged by the renewed commitment to merit-based leadership. On my last day at Nexus, my team organized a farewell lunch. Jessica presented me with a card signed by everyone. We wanted you to know the impact you've had, she said, her eyes suspiciously bright. Not just on the code we write, but on how we approach our work and stand up for what's right. As I read through the heartfelt messages, I realized that while I was leaving Nexus behind, I was taking something far more valuable with me. The knowledge that integrity and expertise still mattered, that standing up for what's right might be difficult but was always worth it. 6 months later, I was thriving at Synertech. We had built a security division renowned for its rigorous standards and innovative approaches. 3 of my former team members had joined me, bringing their talents to our growing company. And in a particularly satisfying turn of events, We had just won a competitive bid for a major banking security project, beating out Nexus. But the true measure of success wasn't in contracts or competition. It was in the culture we were creating, one where questions were encouraged, where security was never compromised for convenience, and where leadership was earned through expertise and integrity rather than connections. One morning, I interviewed a promising young graduate for an intern position. She seemed nervous but determined. "What made you apply to Synertech?" I asked. "I heard about how you stood up to corporate pressure when security was at stake," she replied earnestly. "That's the kind of leader I want to learn from. Someone who doesn't just talk about integrity, but demonstrates it when it matters." Her answer reminded me of everything I had learned through my experience at Nexus. Sometimes the hardest professional decisions are also the most defining. Standing up for what's right might cost you a job, but compromising your integrity costs you something far more valuable: yourself. As I showed her around our offices, introducing her to the team and explaining our projects, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path that had led me here. What had seemed like a professional crisis had ultimately become the catalyst for something better, not just for me, but for everyone touched by the ripples of that one decision to stand firm in my principles. The journey had taught me that true strength isn't found in titles or authority, but in the courage to uphold your values even when it's difficult. That lesson wasn't just the foundation of my new career. It had become the cornerstone of my approach to life itself. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right felt risky? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more professional journey stories. And if you know someone who might be struggling with their own workplace ethical dilemma, please share this with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges makes all the difference. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your integrity is always your most valuable professional asset.